After day one of the closing arguments at the Diddy trial, opinions are mixed. Some believe the evidence strongly supports the prosecution, while others feel the defense made compelling arguments and points that could sway the jury. The atmosphere is tense as everyone anticipates the trial's outcome. Let me know how you feel after this video.
Everybody wants to be a lawyer until it's time to be a lawyer. What does that mean? Yesterday, the media, social, TikTok world run rampant with incorrect information. And so then yesterday it was time for us to turn down the noise. One band, one sound. You had to turn down the noise and listen to what is the truth. What ended up happening is whether it was TMZ, Fox, CNN, were all incorrectly reporting legal analysis, and in the TikTok legal community, and I'm ran with this incorrect information. Why is this important? Because a lot of folks are relying on what's happening in the Diddy trial based upon incorrect information, based upon what people think, not what they know. And that's what ends up happening. So a couple of things. One, unrelated, if you're out there looking for an attorney, looking for someone to represent you, the things that we ask is that you ask a couple of questions. Do you actually try cases? Do you actually practice criminal defense work? And have you actually even been inside of a federal courtroom? A lot of people want to be loud and be theatrical, but if there's no substance behind there, no work, no actual legal acumen, run. I'm seeing so much incorrect information yesterday about Diddy's charges were dropped because people simply didn't do the research and didn't look at the law, and that scared me. And that's from lawyers alike. I'm just reporting, well, this is what TMZ said. I don't know what law school TMZ went to. So be very careful with that when looking for someone. Make sure they actually know what they're talking about, and you're not just saying it because a lot of folks are on here simply for TikTok views and try to make money. And yeah, we don't get any money from TikTok whatsoever. We do it because we like doing this. So the closing arguments are literally TikTok doc about to start on Mr. Combs's trial. It's kind of wild because when we started this TikTok journey, I think I had like 3,000 followers, and then started the Diddy analysis, and now we're up to 388,000, and it's about to be over. Seems like yesterday we rocked the show. I laced the track, you rocked the flow. Anyway, so it's just like Diddy and I are coming to our climactic close. So the question is, how would I do a closing argument? First, we were a prosecutor for quite some time. And so how would I close this case? If it was me, if I was the United States of America, the first thing that I would do is you want to catch everybody's attention. You don't want to stand up and say, thank you so much for your time. We appreciate you. Jury service is the most difficult thing that you can do. That's stupid. What should happen if I were prosecuting this case? The first thing I do is I put on a big board on the screen for them to see the worst text message you can come up with. One from Cassie, one from somebody. I don't want to do this anymore. This is not what I want to be a part of. You treat me like a prostitute. You don't treat me like a person. That'll be the first thing the jury saw. And then I would lean in and I say, you got a glimpse into the mind of blank. Throughout the course of this trial, we have taken time, energy, and effort to break down every element of the offenses that Mr. Combs is looking at. You got to look into his enterprise. You got to look into his organization. And you got to see a group of individuals whose entire purpose was to help his interest, to help his sexually deviant interest, and ruining lives for quite some time. I cannot thank you enough for sitting here and listening to it because, again, you have had to endure some stuff that we wouldn't want on anybody. But that's the same thing that Cassie had to endure. And I would go on and on and on and on and on, and then we would break down the enterprise, break down the elements, break down it bit by bit. Then what you would do is you would take stuff that you know the judge is going to say. Ladies and gentlemen, His Honor in a couple of hours is going to tell you what RICO is. He's going to tell you what this is. And then you start breaking it down and why your case meets that. And then at some point, you'll sprinkle in the Cassie video. You'll say, you remember this video? Then probably at the end, end with one more text message. I would stop, I'd pause, I'd put up a text message from Mr. Combs's words. You don't have to trust me as to what happened all of these years. Listen to the words of Mr. Combs, and then I'd play it. And that's how I would end it. It doesn't have to be 4 hours long. It could be efficient, it could be the point, and it could attack what he has done. I would go through the elements, I would go through the charges, including arson. I would go through the charges and say, this is why we have proven our case. At the longest, it should take 45 minutes to an hour. Period. Every breath you take, take that, take that, take that, take that, take that.
Some of them are. Somebody's dressed in a suit. Good morning, everybody. The twins are here, guys. The twins are here. Nice. Careful with that step. Good morning, everybody. Have a good day in court. All right, the girls. All three of them. They're going into the court. Now we probably got the boys in the back someplace. Good morning, everybody. Have a good morning. Nope, that's it. Okay. That's it. So the boys must be coming separate. Ah, there goes holding hands inside the courtroom. Going inside. So all three, the twins and the girl, the other sister, all holding hands coming inside. Let's see what this one is here. Probably nobody, but we're going to see. Wow. So yeah, I was right. So, there's Quincy. Hey, Quincy.
Doing his thing.
Hey, Justin. Good morning, man.
What up, what up?
Oops, sorry.
Always, as always, amazing.
That's Justin. We got Christian. No, I don't see Christian, actually. I see just Justin and Quincy. I don't see Christian.
Yeah, it's not there.
I don't see Christian at all. He might still be with Kanye West doing that music stuff. Excuse me, sorry. Probably doing the music stuff.
There was Michael Jackson's anniversary of passing yesterday. You got on their shoes and pants. Nice commemoration.
I don't know. Did he come in with the girls? I didn't see him. Maybe I missed him. We got 116. 116.
Aloha's missing all the action today.
This is another example of clear-cut coercion. He threw her off the boat without her passport. He wanted Cassie to be afraid to say no to him. Hey, Christian, what's up, man? How you been? You all right? Why you coming so late today?
How you feeling today, bro? Feeling all right? Have a good one, man. Have a good one.
There's Christian, guys. Wow, see, I caught him over here. That was Christian Combs, guys. That was young Diddy.
It was his kingdom, and everyone was there to serve him. The prosecutor in the Diddy trial did not hold back, laying out why the government believes that he should possibly spend the rest of his life behind bars. Standing directly in front of the jury, Assistant U.S. Attorney Christy Slavic had a PowerPoint presentation helping the jury understand how all the pieces that the government had been laying out for the last 2 months all fit together, starting with the most serious charge, RICO. Meanwhile, sitting behind her is Diddy with his chair pushed all the way back away from the defense table, and he is looking straight ahead with his hands in his lap. I'm talking unusually still. Throughout this trial, I've reported that he has been an active participant of his own defense. He's usually looking at the screen in front of him, writing sticky notes. He was doing none of that today. One of the first things that the prosecutor did was acknowledge to the jury that RICO is usually associated with the mafia or the mob. Though she acknowledged that this isn't the same thing, she broke down a similar chain of command, saying at the top of this chain was Diddy, the boss, and right under him, his loyal lieutenants, including Christina Quorum, his chief of staff, and his security guards. Christina, the prosecutor explained, was his right brain. She lived with him and made around $600,000 a year. Them, she said, were the foot soldiers, or the army of employees, the assistants. Then the prosecutor explained that RICO actually has a lower threshold than the jury might think, emphasizing that multiple predicate acts don't need to be proven, just two, and the two can be as simple as his assistants getting drugs for Diddy twice. And that's a predicate act that the prosecution prosecution decided to start with: drug distribution, explaining that drugs were a, quote, essential ingredient to every freak-off. Keep both Cassie and Jane awake and compliant for days during these freak-offs. He went on to say, "We are not talking about marijuana, we are talking about hard drugs," then started naming them: Coke, Molly, K, GHB, Xanax, Oxy, Mushroom, and 2C. He pushed back on the defense's claims that these drugs were for personal use, saying that quantity doesn't matter, adding that giving drugs to someone else is distribution, period. The prosecutor then explained that they've shown hundreds of acts of drug distribution alone. That didn't stop them from going through the other predicate acts. Then dedicated an hour to breaking down count 4, which is the sex trafficking of Jane. All while she's doing this, also present in the court are Diddy's 3 teenage daughters. They have been missing from the courtroom since week 1, but they were there hearing everything that they missed, including explicit text messages. Now, I couldn't get a read on their expression, but I did notice that Chance was sitting in between the twins, and on the left side of them was Mama Combs. Chance looked to be the one that was paying the most attention. She was leaning forward and resting her face on her hands. She was looking at the court artist or straight ahead at the prosecutor. All 3 girls were writing and passing notes back and forth. Heading back into court, but I will have more updates later when it's less windy.
Happy Thursday, day 31 of the Diddy trial. Might be the most damning yet, okay? Closing arguments have started with the government, and they have walked the jury through straight hell, okay? One racketeering act at a time, and let's go over what they've discussed thus far. The government started off making it plain and clear. Diddy was not a participant. He was the boss, the mastermind. They said he was the center of this organized crime ring, and his inner circle: paid staffers, bodyguards, girlfriends turned handlers, assistants, same roles, different names. Not only that, she named names: KK, Christina Coram, D-Rock, Uncle Paulie, Fahim. She reminded the jury that the police found defaced rifles, AR-15s in his house, and that his operation was armed and ready to go. Now let's talk drugs, because the government detailed what they consider a supply chain of hard substances like coke, ketamine, meth, GHB, Molly, 2C, and not just regular weed, but real dangerous drugs, okay? And she also dropped names in this because she named suppliers such as Guido, One Stop, and it was all coordinated by KK, Christina Coram. Consumed and distributed by Diddy to and by the women. Then they went over kidnapping. Cassie being trapped in hotels after she was assaulted, allegedly. Capricorn Clark forced to take that lie detector test for days in that random empty building. About how they told her she'd end up in East River if she failed the lie detector test. They also described the 2011 incident where he kicked in her door with a gun and said, "Get dressed, we going to kill unalive Cuddy." And it's very detailed. For my subs, I'll go over like the full closing statement for y'all. Then they detailed the ex-trafficking. They said it wasn't about a messy relationship. It was about coercion, threats, and control. They talked about how Jane was groomed, drugged, and forced into freak-offs, told to slow down during intercourse. She was given money and gifts to keep quiet, and then threatened with exposure of sex tapes. And that's not even half of it. Stick around and I'll go over some more in part 2. Okay, here we are for part 2. Going over the closing arguments by the assistant U.S. attorney. She told the jury that forced labor isn't a job with no paycheck. It's coercion, control, degradation. And according to the prosecution, that is exactly what Cassie, Jane, Mia, and Capricorn Clark endured. She said Mia was forced to work days without any sleep. Diddy essayed her on a private jet, in her bedroom, in a closet, at Revolt. She couldn't say no, not even to the little things, because she knew the cost: her job, her safety, her sanity. HR, she said, what a joke. It was for Combs. She couldn't go to the police because he had all the power. She talked about Capricorn Clark being threatened in Central Park, being held in that room for multiple days, doing that lie detector test. Said she was forced to join a revenge ride to unalive Kid Cudi. She had her son to take care of, but Diddy controlled her future. He threatened to blacklist her from the industry, which later we found out that's something that he actually did, allegedly. Then she walked the jury through Diddy's cover-up, allegedly. After Cassie's lawsuit settled, they said Diddy got paranoid. He called Jane and it was recorded. He fed her a false story. Said that they just did kinky, S-H-I-T. So basically, within that call, he was trying to make her say that that's what they did, just had kinky, S-E-X. She said you could literally hear his Sharpie scratching as he forced her to say what he wanted her to say. She said he sent D-Rock to pressure Mia, which is the same Mia that seen him beat Cassie bloody. She said the government says that's what they would call witness tampering. And then she said the obstruction is multiple things, but one in particular is the missing Intercontinental footage that he paid to not be released. Finally, she addressed the venue and she said, and I quote, "All they need is one act in the Southern District of New York, and baby, there were many. Manhattan Freak-Offs, Escort Travel, Jane's Trauma, it landed right here." She said, you spent 7 weeks listening. You saw the abuse. You heard from Kid Cudi, Regina Ventura, Deontay Nash. The defendant controlled everything. And that was the end of their closing arguments. And tomorrow we will get to hear Diddy's team's closing arguments. Later.
So the prosecution have just presented their closing arguments in the Diddy trial. They said that he was a man who wouldn't take no for an answer. They spoke about an inner circle of, quote, loyal lieutenants who helped him commit crimes like sex trafficking, arson, forced labor, and transportation for prostitution. These are charges and allegations that Diddy has consistently denied. They said he ran a criminal enterprise that was under his complete control, with Christina Quorum, his chief of staff, as his right hand. The prosecution told the court that up until his arrest, Diddy was trying to pay off potential witnesses and obstruct justice. But in their closing line, they said now it's the time for justice. It's time to find the defendant guilty. Tomorrow, the defense will present their closing arguments.
The Sean Diddy Combs trial nears the end. We want to know what people are saying about this high-profile case that's captivating the country.
So, listen, the people that are following me really, really wanted the prosecution to pull through. But one thing, whether there were the people watching the live tweets from what was going on in the courtroom, listening to my perspective or anybody else's perspective, everybody is super happy and super impressed with the prosecution's closing arguments. Night and day. So in the beginning, people were saying, I don't see RICO. Where's the RICO? What's going on with the RICO? It was like hounding in the back of our heads. And even with the testimony, people were still like, I don't know. It seems suspicious. However, with these closing arguments, there is not one person, whether they support Diddy or not, saying they don't see a potential RICO case.
They saying Diddy gonna walk away with a slap on the wrist. Nah, lock that nigga up. I done talk shit about him online. If he a super villain, if he a super villain like they say he is, I need his ass gone for good. I thought Diddy was about to get a triple life sentence or something. What y'all mean he not getting in trouble like that? What? After all that? I thought it was a done deal. I thought, we just yapping, but this nigga definitely getting put under the prison. What you mean? If Diddy gets anything less than 20 years, I don't know. And I know there's people saying, it's not a crime to be too freaky. But it is a crime to, threaten people's lives. It is a crime to blow up cars. It is a crime to beat that girl up and down the hall when she was trying to leave. Those are crimes. And whatever the fuck else they say he did it. What you mean Diddy about to get off with a slap on the wrist? If this nigga get probation or house arrest or whatever they be giving people, if he get anything less than 20 years, bro, oh no, some people about to be in trouble. If he just gets a slap on the wrist, people about to die.
Prosecution delivered its closing argument today in the Diddy trial, with Assistant U.S. Attorney Kristi Slavic taking the entire day. She started with and spent most of her time on racketeering, probably because she realizes, like I've been saying, that racketeering will make or break this case. Prostitution is a gimme, but if the government only gets convictions on prostitution, this will be the most expensive prostitution trial in American history. On racketeering, the government needs 2 or more RICO predicate acts. Those are drugs, kidnapping, arson, bribery, prostitution, forced labor, and of course, sex trafficking. She focused on the drugs, which is the easiest to prove, and because they found a lot of drugs when they raided Diddy's homes. Then she talked about forcing Capricorn Clark to take a lie detector test and keeping Cassie in the hotel room, both of which are kidnapping, and the Molotov cocktail of Kid Cudi's car for arson, and the $100,000 bribe of the hotel security guard for bribery. When she talked about sex trafficking, the argument was more challenging, but the prosecution showed 27 men who had sex with Jane or Cassie or both, and the forced fraud or coercion for sex trafficking. She talked about grooming and love bombing the victims and the following reasons why the freak-offs were not consensual. Did he use violence and threats of violence, said he wouldn't pay their rent, pushed drugs on them, lied and said he would spend time with them and take them on trips, and blackmailed them with sex tapes to force and coerce Cassie and Jane to have sex with other men. They agreed to do so, not because of choice, but because of fear. And the reason they never left was because of the trauma bond that compelled them to stay. The prosecution spent less time on victim Mia, which leads me to believe that they did not think she was very credible. Some of the jurors were reportedly skeptical of her testimony too. The forced labor argument was a stretch in my opinion. The prosecution closed the way they normally do by asking the jury to hold Diddy accountable and not let him get away with it. Tomorrow, Mark Agnifilo will deliver the defense closing, followed by the government's rebuttal before the jury starts deliberating on Monday.
Here's part 2 of what prosecutors said during closing arguments in the Diddy RICO trial. For more than 4 hours, prosecutor Kristi Slavic asked jurors to recall testimony they've heard over the last 7 weeks detailing abuse at the hands of Sean Diddy Combs from 34 witnesses, including ex-girlfriends, former employees, sex workers, and federal agents. On Thursday, Slavic outlined the 5 counts Diddy faces, including racketeering conspiracy, sex trafficking, and transportation to engage in prostitution. She ended closing arguments in this case telling jurors, in order to convict Diddy of the 2 counts of transportation to engage in prostitution, the jury must find that he knowingly transported an individual in interstate or foreign commerce intending for that person to engage in prostitution. She said Diddy paid for individuals to travel for sexual encounters with Cassie and Jane in several states and abroad, and outlined multiple examples of that. Transportation for prostitution is also a predicate act under the racketeering conspiracy charge. Slavic said that there is significant evidence that former Chief of Staff Christina Coram knew what was happening in the hotel rooms, facilitated travel for escorts, and ensured Diddy received thousands of dollars in cash when he requested it during and after hotel nights. She said she knew exactly what was happening. Slavic said forced labor is also an element of the racketeering conspiracy charge, telling the jury that they heard evidence of forced labor involving several witnesses. She said that Diddy forcing Cassie and Jane into grueling days-long sexual encounters without sleep quantifies as forced labor. She also referenced the testimony of Mia, Diddy's former assistant, who said that he sexually assaulted her while she was working for him, emphasizing that as Mia's boss, he had all of the power and control over her. She said that Diddy engaged in witness tampering and obstruction after Cassie's lawsuit was filed in November of 2023 and called on people in his circle in an effort to neutralize anyone who could potentially be a problem for him. Slavic pointed to his bail being denied multiple times for this reason. In the end, Slavic concluded her remarks by thanking the jury and summarizing the evidence presented, saying that, quote, up until today, the defendant was able to get away with these crimes because of his money, his power, his influence. That stops now. It's time to hold him accountable. Diddy's defense team will present their closing arguments Friday. The government will have an opportunity to rebuttal before the judge gives the jury instructions ahead of deliberations. I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this. Do you think the prosecution made their case, or do you think it's a stretch? Comment below, like, and follow for more news.
Today, the prosecution laid it all out in regard to Diddy's trafficking and racketeering trial. And they didn't just recap, they laid it all out. Decades of violence, manipulation, substances, and exploitation. Prosecution told the jurors that this wasn't chaos, that this was organized crime. It wasn't about isolated incidents. It was about control, power, and patterns. Jurors were told that from the 2016 assault of Cassie Ventura to the 2024 attack on Jane, that they weren't separate stories. They were all chapters in the same book, a book that was written by Sean Diddy Combs. Prosecution described an enterprise made up of bodyguards, assistants, and staff, and the sole purpose of that mission was to serve the defendant, Sean Combs' every desire through violence, coercion, and manipulation. They talked about how his assistants made $100,000 a year, whereas his chief of staff made $600,000, and that obedience wasn't optional, that it was bought. They talked about how Diddy used silence and shame to hide the truth, using threats, substances, violence, and even making S-tapes in order to control women like Cassie and Jane. She played recordings, showed texts, emails, and even showed a slide of 27 different men allegedly trafficked to them. And when Jane tried to resist, he told her, "You better get on your job," after then beating her, shoving substances down her throat, and texting an escort. He then asked her, "Is this coercion?" Yeah, it's exactly what it is. And to close, prosecution told the jury that he's gotten away with it for decades, using his money, power, and influence, but saying that that stops now and that it's time to hold him accountable. Now, tomorrow is the defense's turn, and I will be here breaking it down, so make sure to hit that follow button if you don't already. And of course, drop your thoughts on how you think the prosecution did in the comments. And if you see that I'm live, it means that we're talking about it.
As Diddy trial gears up for closing arguments tomorrow, June 27th, a former federal prosecutor is saying a guilty verdict for Diddy is in the bag for some charges, despite some shocking missteps by the prosecution. What does this mean for the verdict? According to ex-federal prosecutor Nima Rahmani, a conviction on a prostitution charge is in the bag due to evidence of entertainers being paid and flown interstate. He also believes the RICO charge is likely proven, calling Bad Boy Entertainment a criminal enterprise headed by Diddy. This includes a pattern of alleged activities like drug trafficking, extortion, bribery, and witness intimidation. However, Rahmani thinks the sex trafficking charge is the hardest to prove. He points to emails and messages where Cassie and Jane seem to be setting up the freak-offs and freak-off video that appears to show willing participants. He acknowledged the psychology of abuse, but emphasized the difficulty for jurors in such cases, drawing parallels to the Harvey Weinstein retrial, where victims maintain relationships with their abusers. Rahmani stressed that the prosecution significantly weakened their case by not calling key witnesses like Christina Koram, Diddy's ex-chief of staff, and former bodyguard Damon D-Rock Butler. Both were mentioned by nearly every government witness, and Rahmani believes they could have been compelled to flip against Diddy. Their absence, in his opinion, hurt the RICO charge. Despite this, the prosecution did call over 30 witnesses, including Cassie Ventura and Jane, whose emotional testimonies detailed alleged abuse and forced participation. So while some charges seem strong, the sex trafficking conviction remains an uphill battle, with closing arguments starting tomorrow and the jury potentially beginning deliberations as early as Friday afternoon. The fate of Sean Diddy Combs is incredibly close to being decided. Do you think the prosecution's weakness is calling crucial witnesses will impact the final verdict, especially on the sex trafficking charges? Let us know your predictions in the comments.
Honestly, I feel some type of way. I didn't know I was a third party to, all this violence and coercion, and I thought I was just there for a good time with consenting adults and making good money off of it. But I was approached by Jane Doe through Instagram, actually. She reached out to me through Instagram, asking me if I was in Los Angeles, if I'm single, and come hang out. And she did mention that she had boyfriend, husband that liked to watch, and I was like, I charge that kind of thing. So actually it was more like performance based, usually like $4,000 to $7,000.
Is it just me, or do others feel like the RICO case that the SDNY is putting on is not the same case that they started with when these indictments and raids were happening on Diddy's home? Because I feel like when we first started this and found out that these raids were happening and this information on Diddy, it was just like, oh my gosh, they must have something crazy. And they said they confiscated hard drives and all these things, and I don't know if they're not coming into play because of maybe very big names and faces that would have been on those tapes. But right now, I don't know if the prosecution has proven their case beyond a reasonable doubt. We've established he's not a great boyfriend. We've established that he has very weird sexual appetites and tastes. But the fact that the defense didn't even call any witnesses, and then the prosecution has dropped 3 charges, I don't know. I don't know if it's going to be enough for a jury to convict him. But maybe I'm wrong. You guys let me know.
Prosecution's closing argument lasted nearly 5 hours. Let's break it down. I'm an attorney and I'm following the Diddy trial, so you don't have to. The purpose of a closing argument is to give each side's attorneys one last chance to talk to the jury directly before they make a decision. Think of it as a final pitch where each attorney tries to convince the jury why their side should win based on the evidence and testimony that came out during trial. In their closing argument, prosecutors portrayed Diddy as the orchestrator and leader of a criminal enterprise that used his power, wealth, and influence to commit and conceal a pattern of brutal schmex crimes, including schmex trafficking, kidnapping, arson, forced labor, and bribery over a span of 2 decades. Diddy was repeatedly described as the head of a criminal organization who does not accept no for an answer. The prosecutors argued that Diddy used his business empire, inner circle, and financial resources to facilitate and cover up his crimes. The prosecution emphasized that Diddy ruled through power, violence, and fear, using intimidation, threats, and actual violence to coerce women into non-consensual intimate acts and to silence victims and witnesses. They detailed how Diddy's close associates, including his chief of staff, personal assistants, and a rotating security team, were instrumental in perpetuating and concealing crimes, acting as his, quote, small army to harm women and suppress the truth. The prosecution highlighted testimony from key witnesses, including Cassie and Jane, both of whom described being forced to have schmex with other men at Diddy's direction and suffering physical harm. The prosecution compared incidents from 2016 and 2024 to show a consistent pattern of coercion and violence. The prosecution also spent a significant amount of time discussing Cassie and Diddy's age difference and how that may have contributed to the coercion throughout their relationship. They argued that Diddy counted on silence and shame to enable his actions, leveraging his celebrity status to evade accountability and keep victims from coming forward. While only 2 predicate crimes are needed for a RICO charge, the prosecution asserted that Diddy had committed hundreds with the support of his devoted staff. The prosecution concluded by urging the jury to hold Diddy accountable, stating, quote, "Until this moment, the defendant has evaded justice due to his wealth, power, and influence. That ends here. It's time for him to face the consequences of his actions." The defense is scheduled to present its closing argument on Friday, followed by a prosecution rebuttal, after which the jury will begin deliberations. So hit follow for all the updates.
Let me tell you, yes, Misa is. On top of Misa's son getting a civil lawsuit filed against him by the ambulance chase and Tony Busby, along with Hamburger LaCombs, with 2 different lawsuits with 2 men. Oh, Lord, there's so much shit going on with this family. And then on top of his brother Christian having a few, between Justin and Christian Combs, there is 7 civil lawsuits. I don't think any are criminal yet. Poor Miss Janice. She got a lot on her shoulders. Misa shows up to court today, closing arguments today, and from what I'm reading online, the prosecution tore that ass up. Now, the defense gonna come do their thing, and then after they get through, the head lady in charge of the prosecution gonna come in and knock it out the ballpark. From all the people that was in the courtroom today, Hamburglar was mad as hell. He was staring and pissed and livid because he, anything's possible now. But I don't think he gonna get out of this. I might be wrong about that. She showed up like Catherine Chancellor after a fresh nip and tuck facelift. Now, there has been talk on the internet of people who were in the courtroom that Misa seems to have had some type of cosmetic procedure done. I don't know if that's true. What I do know is Misa gonna keep that shit on now. She gonna make a fashion statement. But I don't know if they went in under her neck and, I don't know if she had a little work on her gobbler or whatever. Oh, Misa. Now her son, this show is a... But, Hamburglar should have kept his fucking tallywhacker in his pants and none of this shit would be going on. Allegedly, Miss Janice. Allegedly.
All right, let's talk Diddy. Very, very interesting stuff going on, in my opinion, on this case. The government has dropped several of the allegations for the RICO count and things of that nature. The arson, which they had 0 proof of. I can't even believe they allowed testimony on the arson. Absolutely no proof of the arson and the 911 that was burnt down to the ground or whatever was happened to that car, and the kidnapping. Again, the lack of evidence, the lack of proof, the lack of organization that they actually put these things into a into an indictment, use that indictment to keep him and hold him, make these allegations so that he shouldn't have bond, make all these allegations so he shouldn't have bond. This should have been a case where he should have been granted bond. He was ready to self-surrender. It was kind of a joke on that side of it. And we're going to see how this all shakes out, see what the jury does. They dismissed one of the jurors because they thought that he wasn't being truthful for where he lived. I thought that was an overkill. I thought they should have kept him on the jury, especially because he was African American, and I think that's what the prosecution wanted to do, is get rid of him. But we're going to see where this all shakes out. I don't think this is a clean sweep. I think the RICO case is a stretch. The sex trafficking, I think they could walk him on if they really thought about it. I think he's a John that has a violence, a violence problem. I think he needs anger management. He's not a good guy. And this is going to be the closing. He's not a good guy, but is it the things that he was doing criminal, or were these things that individuals wanted to do on their own volition, get paid $10,000 to show up and have sex with Cassie, where she was arranging most of the engagements, even without Diddy there. I actually was able to speak with one of the, prostitutes in this case, where he called my office to discuss some things. He's got a new book coming out, and I'll follow up with what he had to say, everything that's not attorney-client privilege.
Grab your popcorn and get your ears on because, baby, the prosecution came swinging today in the Diddy trial. Guys, today was closing arguments for the prosecution. They opened with this bomb. It was his kingdom and everyone around him existed to serve him. Yeah, that's how the government is painting Diddy's entire operation. Assistant U.S. Attorney Christy Slavic wasn't playing. She stood front and center in front of the jury, PowerPoint locked and loaded, walking through why they believe Diddy should never see freedom again. She broke it all down like a movie. Every witness, every claim, every connection from the past 2 months, all tied together with one word: RICO. Meanwhile, Diddy, he sat there with his chair pulled all the way back like he didn't even want to be at the table. Hands in his lap, eyes locked straight ahead. No notes, no whispers, no nods, just still. And let me tell you, that's not how he's been the whole trial. Usually he's scribbling, reacting, active, but not today. Today was different. Now here's where it gets serious. The prosecutor told the jury straight up, RICO charges, yeah, they're usually used on organized crime like the mafia. But that's exactly the point. She laid out the chain of command. At the top, Diddy, the boss. Below him, his trusted lieutenants, including Christina Quorum, his chief of staff, who was described as his right brain. Sis lived with him and pulled in $600K a year. Below her, the assistants, security, the foot soldiers. Then the prosecution explained something wild. Under RICO, they don't need to prove 100 crimes, just 2 predicate acts. That's it. What were the first examples they gave? His assistants allegedly getting him substances twice. That alone qualifies. So, boom, they started with substance distribution. They claimed substances were an essential ingredient to every freak-off. Yeah, you heard that right. They said the substances were used to keep women like Cassie and Jane awake and compliant for days. And no, we're not talking about just weed. The prosecution named names. A white boy, Molly, K, Xanax, Oxy, mushrooms, Tusi. The defense tried to say it was personal use, but the prosecution clapped back, said it doesn't matter how much. If you're giving it to someone else, that's distribution. Point blank. She told the jury they've already shown hundreds of substance-related acts, and that was just the start. She spent a full hour breaking down count 4, SMEX trafficking. Now, while all of this is going down, guess who showed up? Diddy's teenage daughters. They've been missing from the courtroom since week 1. But today, they were there, hearing everything, even the explicit text being read out loud. Chance sitting between the twins, on the end, Mama Combs, and she was locked in, leaned forward, face in her hands, eyes bouncing between the court artist and the prosecutor. The girls were writing notes to each other and passing them quietly, all while the government laid out one of the most serious cases we've ever seen brought against a music mogul. Follow me, I'm Chasta Affiliate, bringing you all the juicy updates on the Diddy trial. More to come tomorrow when the defense lays out their final arguments. Until next time, be the change that you want to see in the world. We still on? And off the record, I could only imagine how Diddy is feeling. They said he was acting real solemn today. I'm sure he kind of scared. Judging by the temperature of the courtroom and the consensus of the people, he might be doing a little time, y'all. It's looking a little shady for your boy. All right, until next time. Peace.
Diddy trial update, closing arguments, day 1. Prosecutors went first, and boy oh boy did they get up in that ass. Assistant U.S. Attorney Christy Slavic was delivering the prosecution's closing arguments today. She took up pretty much the entire day to deliver these closing arguments, and she really went through the entire case. All these past several weeks of testimony and witnesses, she recounted all of that and looked at the jury dead in the eye and said, "You have got to find Diddy guilty. He is guilty of RICO. He is guilty of trafficking. It couldn't be clearer. As she was going through all of it, from A to Z, it was pretty damning. I have to say, it was pretty damning hearing all of it summed up into one cohesive, tight argument that was apparently delivered quite powerfully by U.S. Attorney Slavic. Based on the consensus I've been reading online, guilty. Guilty on all charges. Guilty as charged. Now, obviously, Diddy's defense team is going to have a chance to rebut this in their own closing arguments, which are scheduled to go down Friday, tomorrow. They're going to have all day Friday to do this. Mark Agnifilo, who's like one of the lead guys, is going to take the lead on closing arguments. It's not going to be Teddy Pendergrass or Teddy Garrett, whatever her name is. Mark Garagos' daughter. It's not going to be her. I got to say, he is up against a tall order in terms of convincing the jury that, hey, come on, these are just some freaky deaky people. Come on, no big deal. Nah, dog, it is a big deal. And like the prosecution made clear during their closing arguments today, if he's guilty of doing this just once during all these years of alleged trafficking these women, if he's guilty of doing it only once during that whole time, he's guilty. One time means guilty. That's what they made clear. And with that type of like parameter, that's going to be tough for Marky Mark. He's got a lot on his plate tomorrow, and I don't think he's going to win. After Mark Agnifilo delivers his closing arguments tomorrow, the jury will have the whole weekend to just be off. They'll come back, they'll get the jury instructions on Monday, and then they'll go into jury deliberations. The judge is trying to get this wrapped up before 4th of July. He doesn't want to hold these people through the 4th of July holiday weekend. We'll see. I suspect that the jury is going to be pretty quick to come to a verdict on this. I know there's a lot of outlets on there speculating like, oh, it's a toss-up. It's not a toss-up, dude. It really isn't. At this point, to me, it looks like the writing's on the wall. And yeah, your favorite diddler icon is going to prison. Yes.